So let's talk about the elements of art and what we see in the artwork. Let's start with line. Looking at Three Musicians by Picasso, I see many types of lines. Thick lines, like in the arm here. Thin lines, like the texture hairs on the dog and the beard. I see wavy lines, diagonal lines. Most of the lines are straight lines. There's a few curved lines. There's horizontal lines that go side to side, and there are vertical lines that go straight up and down. Next, we're going to talk about shape. I see many geometric shapes in this artwork because that was typical of Cubism. So there are triangular shapes, rectangles, parallelogram shapes. Some of these shapes are a little bit circular or like ovals, so those are pretty geometric shapes, even though they're rounded because we can name them. And I see squares. I do not see any organic shapes, and that's typical of Cubism. Next, color. Looking at this artwork, I see a few colors from the color wheel. Blue, which is a primary color. Yellow, which is also a primary color. And this looks like an orange color, so that's a secondary color also found on the color wheel. I do see some colors not on the color wheel, and they're neutral colors. So these gray, browns, the white, and the black, those aren't colors found on the color wheel, and so they are neutral colors. Next, let's take a look at value. Do we see any lightness or darkness within the artwork? No, I don't see a lot of value. There's no shading being used, and the colors look pretty flat. So solid areas of color, they don't gradually go from light to dark. There are some darker blacks and browns, but otherwise no real value. That's a very flat piece. Let's talk about form. The artwork, it's a 2D painting, so it's flat on a surface. So the artwork itself is not a form like a sculpture. And the objects painted, they don't look real because there's no value on there. They look like flat shapes and not shaded forms. So there's not really many forms happening. How about texture? Do you see any texture in the artwork, Three Musicians by Pablo Picasso? I think that Picasso used line to show texture in the dog's hair and in the beards. So he used line to create the texture of hair. And lastly, we're going to look at space. The painting looks very flat, so I don't see any depth of space, so there's no distance. But there is positive and negative space. Obviously, the musicians are the positive space. And then there's negative space around them, like what looks like the wall behind them and on the floor underneath them. So this is just one example of how you can look at an artwork and talk about the elements of art. You'll do this process throughout this learning set and throughout the unit of looking at art. So I hope that this breakdown was helpful to you.